In this video, I am going to discuss why I collect case knives over other kinds of knives. There are multiple reasons why I particularly like case. Now, case is not perfect, as no company is. Nevertheless, there are certain things about it that cause me to prefer them. The first thing I will say right off the bat is I like that they are American made. I'm kind of odd in the way that if I'm going to have a knife in my pocket, I want it to be American made. We've got good knife makers here in America, and so I prefer to carry one that's been American made. Some examples of other knives would be like this little Frost. It's got a nice looking handle on it, and it's cheaper. But the reason why it's cheap is because of where it's made. Now that knife will cut whatever you need it to cut. Another example of a good usable knife that's made in China would be modern old timers. Like this one right here. This is the 120T. You can buy it cheap, but it's not American made. It's made in China. Even buck. A lot of the bucks are made in China instead of America. Again, you can get them for cheaper, but they're not American made. And lastly, to illustrate the point would be Rough Rider. Rough Rider's probably the biggest Chinese traditional knife maker. And they'll cut anything you need them to cut. But I prefer to have a knife that is American made. And so that is the first thing I like about it, is that they're American made. The next thing is the look. I like the overall look of a case better than any other knife. Put it in perspective, this is an older old-timer. You can see the Ting stamp on it there. If I can get it to focus. Schrade Walden, NY, USA. This is a good knife. But it doesn't look like a case. You compare these two together. This case is a beautiful knife. And in my opinion, this old-timer is a good, useful knife, but it's not beautiful in the way that these case knives are. If you know what I mean. You get not only a usable knife with case, but you get a beautiful knife. To compare even like this Rough Rider, you can compare it like with this case Mini Trapper. They're both a light blue. But the finish on the case, everything is just smooth. All the corners are smooth. Everything's blended together. The back springs and everything are just polished up. And the fit and finish on the case, to me, is just better. I simply prefer the case in terms of its look. Just the style in which they make them, the way they polish them up so much and stuff. Now we do have to say, of course, the case costs a whole lot more than the Rough Rider. A lot more. So you're paying a lot more money, so keep that in mind. If you're just buying a knife to use rough, well, maybe you'd prefer to get a Rough Rider because you won't be spending as much money on it. Nevertheless, I like the look of a case better. The next thing is the design. Case has some of the best designed knives out there. And what I mean by that is they're not too heavy. They're not too light. They fit in your pocket well. They've got enough blade. They're just designed good. And overall, I find that their designs, to me, are just pleasing to the eye. They're not too extreme. They're not too bland. To me, they're in that perfect middle ground. The Razor might be one of the most extreme-looking knives from case, but it's still designed to be extremely useful. Polished, it's just a beautiful knife. The next reason why I prefer to collect case over other brands is the availability. Namely, I'm thinking of something like a GEC here. GECs are great knives, but they are hard to find. You can't just go down to your local pawn shop and rummage through a box of them and find one to clean up and restore. And I love to do that. I prefer to buy a knife used and clean it up. You can't do that with a GEC. And so that's why I prefer case. It's because they're easier to get. The next thing is affordability. Cases cost more than Rough Riders. usually 5, 6, 10 times more than a Rough Rider. Same thing, more than an old timer, so they're not cheap. Nevertheless, you can afford them. You may have to save up for a little bit, but you can afford one. And you can get it and put it in the collection, and its value will go up over time instead of going down. And that's one thing I like about them. They cost a little more, but you just have to save up your money for a little while and get one when you've got the extra money. But put it in your collection, use it, enjoy it, and its value will go up every year. The GECs are extremely expensive, and they're hard to get. And so because of that, I prefer case. The next thing is collectibility. I think case is probably the most collected pocket knife in the world, and none others compared to it. If you like to collect different patterns, different designs, case is the brand to go with. We got a full-size trapper, we got a mini trapper, we got a mini copperhead, we got a small Congress, we got a razor, we got a Sodbuster Jr. And these are just a few different brands of knives and different styles of knives. Not to mention all the different covers on them. We got pearl, we got amber bone, we got sky blue, we got lizard skin. And then you got jigging patterns. You got corncob jig, you got Rogers jig. You got, of course, smooth with the pearl. You got Crandall jig on sky blue. Then you get the shields. You've got round oval shields like this one that say Case XX. You've got bow tie shields that say Case USA. You got arrowhead shields that say Case in them, and many, many others besides that. There's even some knives like this little pearl mini copperhead that don't have a shield on them at all. And so because of that, they're more collectible. And I like that aspect of them. I enjoy the collecting aspect. Because you can collect one and you can trade it, and you can trade. It's exciting to enjoy a knife for a while, then trade it for another one to enjoy. The last thing is the usability. Case knives are usable. There's certain ones somebody may not use a lot, like this pearl knife because of its value. But nevertheless, if somebody wanted to use it, there's nothing about this knife that makes it in the least unusable. It's got a great design to it. They're very usable. And case knives are meant to be used. They're designed to be used, though many people only collect them. And so that's the last thing to mention, is that because they are good users, it's hard to beat a traditional trapper for an everyday carry. Between the blades on it and the size of the handle and so on, and the shape of the handle is ergonomic. It's one of the best usable knives you're going to find. And so these are some of the reasons why I like to collect case. There are other reasons. Now I will say that sometimes, you'll get a knife from case that isn't put together as good as it should be. When that happens, either send it back to them and return it and get another one. Fix it yourself, as I have done. It's exciting to learn how to fix them. You can buff them, sand them, tighten the bolsters, all kinds of stuff you can do. And I've learned a lot from it, and I enjoy fiddling with them. So you can fix it yourself, you can send it off to them and return it, or you can send it off to them and have them repair it. My repair service with case, when I send one off to them, has always been A++. They've got the best customer service that I could imagine. It's wonderful. And so, that is the caveat. These are handmade. And you're going to notice they're handmade. You're going to notice different aspects of them. You can have two of the same knife, and the corners will be different. Like this blue one, for instance, this blue trapper is square. Where the bone meets the back spring, it's got a square 90-degree angle coming across the back and going down the sides. In contrast to it, this red trapper, which as you can see, they are the same knife, just a different handle, is pocket worn, and it's rounded. You can see it's got a round on the back. It's not square. Now some of that has to do with the series, and some of that simply has to do with who was working on it that day and how much they sanded it. You'll see two of the same knives, pick them up, hold them. They'll be identical, same cover, same pattern, everything, but they'll feel different in the hand because of who was sanding them that day. They call it hefting. And so each one is unique and each one's individual. Because they're handmade, they're hardly ever perfect. There's always a unique something to them where you can identify your knife above others. But that is one thing to keep in mind. Comment down below why you like case knives. Until then, everybody have a good day and keep your knife sharp.